When I first came to Arkansas, we bought a farm over in Greasy Valley, the old Remington place where all the Remington boys grew up. They're from around here. And we lived there. That was until the war started and we had to move back to Quapaw, so I was off one place. And then after the war, we moved back over in Greasy Valley, and I started to high school at King Hill, which we had gone to King Hill before when we lived here. And we lived on something called the old Griffin place, which now the Remingtons own, and I think their boy was here today. And then we moved back to Oklahoma City. In the meantime, we had to live in a tent when I was 17 days old. We had lived in a boxcar out in western Oklahoma, and we had lived in apartments and old drafty houses, washed on washboards with the boil pot, boiled the white clothes, things like that.
Who were your parents, and tell me a little bit about them?
William Bill Brasier and Nellie Alma Brumble. And they came to through Arkansas to Oklahoma and through Kansas back. They were both born in Kansas, right on the border at, can't remember the place, but the lower part of Kansas, right where I-35 goes up nowadays. And got married. My mother picked cotton when she was young. My dad worked at the Yukon flour mill over in Yukon, Oklahoma. And then they took my dad worked for a Concho Sand and Gravel Company. They were quarried the lime, ground it up, and put it on the roads during WPA time. And the trains went back up to my dad's crusher and hauled off all across the lower United States for WPA workers. And then we moved to Arkansas, had a farm, and the war came. We had to move back to Oklahoma at Quapaw, and Dad had to work in the mines because my brothers got drafted.
Tell me about your earliest memories of Cane Hill.
Probably getting to ride the school bus. Clay Duckett was the bus driver, and we came out of Flock Creek around at that time. I was in the 5th grade. Pauline Irwin was my teacher. And in 6th grade, Johnny Miller was my teacher. And I just loved being in Cane Hill because it was the kids were all friendly. I mean, no one thought they were better than us, although we were, with 8 kids, evidently didn't have much. And that was probably my fondest memory. And riding the bus home at night was so exciting, because we knew we were going to get a treat of some kind, glass of milk.
What year did you attend school in Cane Hill? What years?
Well, I believe it would have been 40 till 42 the first time, and then we came back in 44 when I started high school, and then I left when I was 48.
Tell me what it was like to attend school in Cane Hill.
Well, my kid says when I tell this I'm bragging, but I was fairly intelligent, and at first there were some of the kids that played basketball, and I wanted very badly to play basketball, and they just kind of ignored me. And of course I didn't have good clothing or anything like that. I had shaggy hair, and I wanted to play basketball, and I can't remember who was the coach at that time, whether it was Marie Benton or Betty Cole, but they found out that I could work through algebra, other problems better, and I sure got to be friendly all of a sudden. But after that, well, it was, I got in the basketball team. When I was a freshman, I got to play on the junior team until they needed me on the senior basketball team. And I think that part of the year of my freshman year, I got to play with them. At that time, either or could play on the senior team. But I loved basketball.
Tell me about some of your classmates and friends at school. Who were they and what did y'all do?
Well, The one that comes to my mind first, Joy Brown was my friend, and she lived up, and we had to go where through all the black people lived up there. And I was taught never to be prejudiced from the time could talk. And we had to go through this place up there, and all the kids kept telling us we were going to get killed or something happened. But Joy lived up above that place, and I couldn't find it today, but we were real good friends. And then they had to move away when she was a junior. So I made a new friend. By the way, Joy still lives in Guthrie, Oklahoma. She's my age. And the next was Frances Keene. Her mother and dad were dead, and her aunts and uncles went to school here, the Grants. And we got to be real good friends. Worked in the school cafeteria for Mrs. Delap and Mrs. Brawley. But we did that for 4 years, I guess.
Tell me about your teachers.
Well, I think Marie Bibben was always my favorite. I guess all the rest of them are gone, so they won't hear this, but she was mostly my favorite teacher. And she taught math, which I've always loved math, and that may have been it. And then, let's see, I had Mrs. Cole came for a couple of years, Betty Cole. And of course, Martha Elizabeth, I finally inherited her, I think, my junior year. And then her dad taught here 1 year. He was our superintendent 1 year when I was going here. And I got to work on the school annual and got to be involved in a lot of things. And I was offered marriage when I was 17, which a lot of girls were at that age then. And I said, no, I'd rather play basketball. So I did.
Tell me about some of the people in Cane Hill area that you knew, some of your neighbors.
My neighbors, well, we lived over in Gracie Valley, but the old Remingtons I mentioned, that we bought their house, lived down here at the end of town toward the water wheel. And when I could play basketball, I could come over and spend the night with them and ride to the games. And let's see, besides basketball and numbers, what did I like best? Let's see, Mrs. Brawley, I always considered her my friend. And I didn't have too many friends from over here because we didn't get to come often. Oh, Mrs. Skinner, the pastor's wife, was my teacher 1 year in something, and I really enjoyed her. We got to go, our junior, senior class, when we were earning money for our senior trip or something, let us come and do ironing or stuff, things to earn money for us. She'd let us do that. She was really neat.
What stores and businesses do you remember in Cane Hill?
Well, across the street, there was, it seemed like Shaker's store was there when we first came here, but I'm not sure of that. But then he moved over here, and that's what this girl worked, Frances Keene, and I worked, and we'd come down after the first period after lunch, because we worked in the cafeteria, and we wrote to GIs. 15, 16, I think, and Shaker would keep their mail for us. And he was a neat guy, and he'd ask if we had enough to eat, and if we didn't, he'd give us big blocks of cheese and crackers. Bob Arts took over that building across the street, and he let us have dances there, I guess, until they quit. And let's see, that's a business. Oh, my dad, I mentioned earlier, my dad had a garage right in front of where the library is right now. Not the library, the post office. My dad had a garage there for 2 years at one of those periods that after the war. And, I can't think much about where, I know the black school was across the creek. We took lunch to them from our cafeteria. And my Uncle Myron Remington raised chickens up toward the cutoff over into Gracie Valley. And there's a Shaker store here. But when I first came here, when I was very small, Johnny Miller had, in the drugstore building, he still sold prescriptions. And us kids would go out and dig dirt after school, waiting for our bus to come back. And we would dig up in the dirt and find bottles, old bottles, and he'd pay us a penny worth of candy for each bottle we found. And let's see, I think that's the only businesses I could remember. I think the post office was in Shaker's store, if I remember. And then Shaker Yates' daughter Joanne let me spend the night with her so I could go play basketball sometimes.
So what did you do for fun when you were growing up in Cane Hill?
Play basketball. Like I said, we lived over across the mountain. Me and one of my sisters would hike all the way around to Greasy Valley, come up that end of Cane Hill, or we'd walk all the way out through Clyde and around that way back to Greasy Valley, which was about 3 or 4 miles. And when I first moved here, my first thing in the 40s, the store was open at Clyde. And we'd buy a lot of groceries and chicken feed and stuff there. I don't remember. Oh, I do remember a lady that had the phone system here. But I thought it was that house right across the street, but it's evidently further down. I think Bobby told me. She let Francis and I would come in there when we didn't have to be back for certain classes, and she'd show us how to do things. Because I didn't have a phone. You know, it was kind of exciting.
What did adults do for fun back in those days?
Well, normally sit out on the front porch and sing, tell stories of the past, catch up on what you better do tomorrow. And then if my dad was out of town, it was kind of, you girls better do this and do that, and you know, how to conduct yourself. We had a lot of sermons on that.
Do you remember anything about the old mill?
Yes, I think that wheel was first there when I first came to Arkansas, but my aunt lived here, and it could have been on a trip to visit her, but I was thinking it was still there in 39 and 40. I'm not sure when the wheel was. But the old building, part of it was still there when I first saw it, but we didn't live here then.
Let's talk more about your family. What were some of, what kind of business were y'all in?
Well, my dad was a mechanic most of his life. From after we left Pahuska, where the rock crusher was, he was a mechanic. And he had a garage in Papa, Oklahoma, and then he had the one here. And then when he went to Oklahoma City, well, he worked for Western Refrigeration. And that's when diesel trucks first came out, and he could look at a book and tell you how to fix things. And my mother was a stay-at-home, but she'd had to work hard all her life. She had a sad life. There was several of the kids, I can't remember, maybe 12, and they decided they were going to play hooky. So they had brought their lunch bags that time, so they ate in the cafeteria. And someplace they went up there above where the school, college is, on that hill, out of sight, and wouldn't come back. Well, they did have to come back to use bathrooms up there, I think, but at least Martha Elizabeth Moore was my principal then, and she said that she knew what they were up to, and they were smoking. And I believe that some of them got paddled with her paddle with holes in it, but I was not allowed to witness that. But anyway, she loaded up all of the rest of the high school kids. We went over to the cafeteria. They gave us a big 5-pound block of cheese, and you know, the big crackers that are 8, that big, and a bunch of apples, and took us out to Lake Whittington. And I got to climb the fire tower out there. But other than that day, I never did know what happened to all the kids, but I don't think any of them got expelled, but they were sure good the rest of the year. And then there were some kids that would go out and play trick or treat, and they'd get in trouble, although it didn't involve the school. It might involve the bus route or, you know, the roads around here or something, or tipping over a toilet. And that was not fun, so I guess I'd always been taught you don't do other people's property like that you like yours done. So I didn't get involved with it, not because I was goody-goody, but because I was afraid of my mother, probably. That I would walk across that mountain to participate in, like the Easter Sunday service, I sang with them and things. So, but I went to church there in Brasier Valley, and I had gone in Fly Creek when we left down at the other end of the valley. But it was a good life. It's my favorite time of my life out of 85 years, with the years I spent in Arkansas. And I just, when my kids got to high school, I said, you're getting all 4 years of high school in the same place. I said, Cane Hill's no longer there, but you can get the same place. So I moved out to Goodyear, Arizona, and they all went to Agua Fria High School. Got a good background, won scholarships, and been very successful in life. So I feel proud of myself sometimes. That's probably bragging, but and that's probably the truth. I feel proud of myself for leading them. And my mother had picked cotton all the time she was growing up, and she told me, I don't want you picking cotton when you grow up. But her dad was a wanderer. He had gone to college and just decided to wander and let his kid pick cotton and fruit and stuff. And my mother, she told me, she says, and you bring me a book home to read today. Mrs. Hull, I believe, was the librarian. She was a neat lady. I can't remember her name's Hull. She had a son or grandson named Danny that went here. She'd let me take books home 2 or 3 at a time just for my mother to read. And she knew they'd be careful, but my mother was over there by herself if Dad was working away from home. But we raised chickens, thousands of them at a time. We farmed.
Here in Arkansas?
Over right on the old Griffin place, we called it. And it was good for me. That's probably why I'm so healthy at 85. I could probably think more of Cane Hill, but about Daddy's garage and about...
Where was the garage located?
It was right in front of where that post office is now. And he worked on trucks. At one time, my sister and I would come by here, and there was a guy named Lee. I think he was involved with Hal Jones at some time. Had a tomato factory in Evansville, and Lee would pick us up, and Dad kept his truck running for him for the whole tomato season. He'd pick us up over in Clyde at my brother's house and take us to Evansville. My sister and I, that's how we earned money for high school.